The rain was coming down hard that Tuesday night in October. Lisa sat on the bathroom floor, her back against the cold tile wall, trying to stop her hands from shaking. The mirror above the sink was cracked from where her husband's fist had missed her face by inches just an hour ago. She touched the tender spot on her cheek where his wedding ring had caught her skin. This wasn't supposed to be her life. Growing up, she dreamed of being a nurse, helping people, making a difference. And she had become one. For 12 years, she'd worked at the local hospital, earning respect from doctors and love from patients. She was good at what she did, really good. But somewhere along the way, her home had become a prison. She could hear him downstairs, watching television like nothing had happened. Like he hadn't just screamed at her for burning dinner. Like he hadn't grabbed her arm so hard. She knew there would be bruises tomorrow. Again, Lisa pulled her knees to her chest and closed her eyes. She remembered when they first met. He'd been charming then, funny even. He brought her flowers and opened doors for her. Her friends thought she was lucky. Her mother loved him. Such a gentleman, she used to say. The changes had been slow at first. Little comments about her clothes, her friends, her job. You work too much, he'd say. Your friends are jealous of what we have. Then came the isolation. One by one, her friendships faded away. Family visits became rare. Her world got smaller and smaller until it was just him and her in this house that felt more like a cage. Every day, the first time he hit her was 3 years ago. She was shocked, he was sorry, and they both pretended it wouldn't happen again. But it did happen again and again. Each time the apologies got shorter, the excuses got weaker, and she got smaller inside herself, like she was disappearing piece by piece. Tonight felt different, though. Tonight he'd done something that crossed a line she didn't even know existed until he crossed it. Mommy? The small voice made her open her eyes. Her 6-year-old daughter, Amy, stood in the bathroom doorway, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. Her little face was worried, the way kids look when they know something's wrong but don't understand what. Hey, sweetheart, Lisa whispered, trying to smile. What are you doing up? I heard shouting again, Amy said, stepping closer. Are you? Okay, Lisa's heart broke a little more. Amy was starting to notice. For years, Lisa had worked so hard to keep the violence away from her children, to make sure they never saw, never knew. But kids aren't stupid. They pick up on things. They feel the tension in a house like smoke in the air. I'm fine, baby, Lisa lied, the words tasting bitter. Just tired. Amy climbed into her lap without being asked, and Lisa held her tight, breathing in the smell of her daughter's shampoo. How many more nights would they have to do this? How many more times would Amy stand in doorways, worried about her mother? Mommy, why does Daddy get so angry? Amy asked quietly. The question hit Lisa like a punch to the stomach. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of. Her children were learning that this was normal, that this was what love looked like, that homes were places where people hurt each other. Sometimes grown-ups have big feelings they don't know how to handle, Lisa said carefully, hating that she was making excuses for him even now, like when I get mad and throw my toys. Sort of like that, honey. But it wasn't like that at all. When Amy threw toys, nobody got hurt. When Amy got angry, she didn't leave bruises. Lisa was teaching her daughter that women should accept being hurt by the people who claim to love them, and that thought made her feel sick after putting Amy. Back to bed, Lisa stood in her daughter's doorway for a long time, watching her sleep. Down the hall, her 4-year-old son Ben was also sleeping peacefully, his small hand curled around his toy car. These two perfect little people trusted her to keep them safe. But how could she protect them when she couldn't even protect herself? She walked downstairs slowly, each step feeling heavy. He was still on the couch, channel surfing like nothing had happened. He didn't even look up when she entered the room. I'm going to bed, she said quietly. Good, he grunted, not taking his eyes off the screen. And next time, don't burn the food. I work hard all day and I shouldn't have to come home to that. Lisa stood there for a moment, looking at this man she'd once loved, this man who was the father of her children. When had he become a stranger? When had his voice become something that made her flinch? But tonight had been different. Tonight. When Ben had started crying during dinner because the shouting scared him, Her husband had turned his anger on their little boy. "Shut up!" he'd yelled at Ben. "Stop being such a baby!" Ben had gone quiet immediately, his little face crumpling, in confusion and fear. And in that moment, Lisa had seen her son's future. She'd seen Ben learning that big men solve problems with anger. She'd seen him learning that it was okay to scare people smaller than you. She'd seen Amy learning to make herself invisible, to walk on eggshells, to believe she deserved whatever treatment she got. The thought made her stomach turn. She couldn't let that happen. She wouldn't. Upstairs in her bedroom, Lisa sat on the edge of the bed and looked around the room. This had been their dream house once. They'd painted these walls together, picked out this furniture together. But now it felt like a museum of a life that had died slowly, day by day, bruise by bruise. She walked to the window and looked out at the street. Other houses, other families, other lives that probably looked normal from the outside too. How many of them were hiding secrets like hers? How many women were sitting by windows tonight, wondering how their lives had gone so wrong? The rain was still falling, and the street was empty except for the occasional car passing by, its headlights sweeping across the wet pavement. Somewhere out there was a different life, a better life, but it felt as far away as the moon. Lisa pressed her forehead against the cool glass and closed her eyes. "Please," she whispered to whoever might be listening. "No more pain. I can't do this anymore. Show me a way out. Show me how to keep my children safe." The words felt like a prayer, like a desperate message thrown into the universe. She'd never been particularly religious, but tonight she needed to believe that someone, somewhere, was listening. That there was hope beyond these walls. She didn't know that those whispered words would change everything. She didn't know that sometimes the universe answers prayers in ways we never expect. She didn't know that help was already on its way. Wearing the most unlikely face she could imagine, all she knew was that she couldn't live like this anymore. And for the first time in years, that felt like the beginning of something instead of the end. 3 days after that whispered prayer, Lisa found herself standing in the rain with 2 small suitcases and her children's hands in hers. The storm had come out of nowhere, just like her decision to finally leave. One moment she was making breakfast, and the next she was packing everything that mattered into 2 bags. While her husband was at work, the bus had dropped them off at the edge of town, and now they were walking with nowhere to go. She'd called the shelter, but they were full. Her sister lived 3 states away and didn't even know what Lisa's life had become. Her parents had passed away years ago. The few friends she had left thought her marriage was perfect from the outside. "Mommy." "I'm cold," Amy said, pulling her thin jacket tighter around her small body. The rain was soaking through everything, and Lisa could feel her son Ben shivering against her leg. "I know, sweetheart. We'll find somewhere warm soon," Lisa promised, though she had no idea where. Her phone battery was almost dead, and she had $47 in her wallet. That was it. That was all that stood between her family and sleeping. On the street, the highway overpass ahead looked like their only option. It wasn't much, but it would keep them dry. Lisa had never imagined she'd be grateful for a concrete bridge, but here they were. Life had a way of changing your perspective. Real quick, they huddled together under the bridge, sitting on their suitcases. The sound of cars passing overhead mixed with the drumming of rain on concrete. Amy was trying to be brave, but Ben was quietly crying. He was only 4 and didn't understand why they'd left their house, why Daddy wasn't with them, why they were sitting under a bridge like homeless people, because that's what they were now. Lisa realized homeless, the word felt strange and scary. 3 days ago, she'd been a respected nurse with a house and a car and a savings account. Now, she was a woman with 2 scared children and nowhere to sleep. "Look, Mommy," Amy pointed to a shopping cart someone had abandoned nearby. It was filled with bottles and cans, probably belonging to someone who collected them for money. "Maybe that person will come back and help us." Lisa's heart broke at her daughter's innocent hope. 6 years old and already looking for angels and strangers because the people who were supposed to love them had failed so completely. That's when they heard the footsteps. Heavy boots on wet concrete, splashing through puddles. Lisa tensed up, pulling her children closer. Her first instinct was always fear now. Every unexpected sound, every stranger's approach, every raised voice sent her into panic mode. The man who appeared was enormous. Not just tall, but big in every way. He had to be at least 6.5 feet tall, with shoulders that looked like they could carry the world. His work clothes were soaked through, and his dark hair was plastered to his head from the rain. Lisa's first thought was to run, but there was nowhere to go. "Hey there," the giant said softly, and his voice was nothing like Lisa expected. It was gentle, quiet, like he was talking to scared animals instead of people. "You folks okay?" Lisa couldn't speak at first. Every instinct told her not to trust strange men, especially big ones. But something about the way he stood, keeping his distance, not moving closer, made her pause. "We're fine," she finally managed to say, which was obviously a lie. They were sitting under a bridge in a storm with suitcases and scared children. Nobody would call that fine. The man nodded like he understood the lie was necessary. "I'm Tom," he said simply. "I live in that old warehouse over there." He pointed to a building about a block away. "I was heading home when I saw you all here." Ben stopped crying and peeked out from behind Lisa's arm. The man's size probably should have scared a 4-year-old. But something about Tom's calm energy seemed to have the opposite effect. "Are you a giant?" Ben asked with the pure curiosity only children have. Tom smiled, and his whole face changed. "Some people think so," he said, "but I'm just regular tall. My wife used to say I was built for reaching high shelves and changing light bulbs, used to say past tense." Lisa caught that detail and wondered what story was hiding behind those words. "It's really coming down out there," Tom continued, looking up at the storm. "This bridge is better than nothing, but it's still pretty cold and wet. My place has heat and hot coffee if you're interested." Every warning bell in Lisa's head went off at once. Strange man, isolated building, her and 2 small children. This was exactly the kind of situation every woman was taught to avoid, but then she looked at her children. Amy was shivering despite trying to be brave. Ben's lips were turning blue. And this storm wasn't showing any signs of stopping. What were her alternatives? Spend the night under this bridge? Try to find an all-night diner that would let them sit for hours with no money to spend? "Why would you help us?" Lisa asked directly. She'd learned to be suspicious of men who seemed too helpful. In her experience, they usually wanted something in return. Tom was quiet for a moment, rain dripping from his hair. "Because someone should," he said finally. "And because I know what it's like to feel lost." There was something in his voice when he said it, a sadness that felt real, not put on. Lisa had gotten good at reading people's intentions over the years. You had to, when your safety depended on knowing when someone was about to explode or when they were telling the truth. "My name's Lisa," she said carefully. "This is Amy and Ben." "Nice to meet you all," Tom said, still keeping his distance. No, this is weird. Big stranger, middle of a storm, offering help. I get why you'd be scared, but I'm not going to hurt you." "I promise." Amy tugged on Lisa's sleeve. "Mommy, I'm really cold," she whispered. Lisa looked at her daughter's pale face. Then at Ben, who was curled up like he was trying to disappear. She thought about the $47 that wouldn't even buy them a motel room for one night. She thought about her prayer 3 nights ago, asking for help. Asking for a way out. Maybe help didn't always come in the package you expected. "Okay," she said quietly, "but just until the storm passes." Tom nodded seriously. "Just until the storm passes," he agreed. "You can leave any time you want." He helped them gather their suitcases, but he didn't try to carry anything for them. He didn't touch them or crowd them or do anything that might feel threatening. Instead, he walked a few steps ahead, leading them through the rain toward the warehouse. As they walked, Lisa wondered if she was making a terrible mistake. But looking at her children, cold and scared and depending on her to keep them safe, she knew that staying under that bridge would have been a mistake too, sometimes. You had to choose between bad options and hope for the best. Sometimes you had to trust that the universe really was listening to desperate prayers whispered in the dark. The warehouse loomed ahead of them, and Lisa sent up another small prayer. "Please let this be help, not harm. Please let this giant of A man be what he seems to be. She didn't know yet that her prayer was about to be answered in ways she never could have imagined. The warehouse from the outside looked like every abandoned building Lisa had ever driven past and felt sorry for. Gray concrete walls, small windows, the kind of place where people might store old furniture or broken dreams. But when Tom unlocked the heavy metal door and stepped inside, Lisa's breath caught in her throat. It wasn't what she expected at all. The space was huge, but it felt warm and lived in. Someone had built walls to create actual rooms, painted everything in soft colors, and filled the place with handmade furniture that looked like it belonged in a magazine. The floors were covered with colorful rugs, and plants hung from the ceiling, creating green corners everywhere you looked. "Wow," Amy whispered, her eyes wide as she took it all in. "It's like a secret house." Tom smiled at her reaction. "My wife always said home should feel like hugs," he said softly. She designed most of this. There was that past tense again. Lisa noticed how Tom's voice got quieter when he mentioned his wife, like he was afraid speaking too loud might break something. "Precious. She had good taste," Lisa said, looking around at the cozy living room area. There was a big couch covered in soft blankets, bookshelves filled with well-loved books, and pictures on the walls of gardens and sunsets and happy moments. "She sure did," Tom agreed. "Let me get you folks some dry clothes and something warm to drink." He disappeared into what must have been a bedroom and came back with towels and some clean clothes. "These might be too big," he said, handing Lisa a soft sweater and some sweatpants. "But they're dry and warm." For the kids, he found shirts. That would work as nightgowns and some thick socks. "The bathroom's right through there," he pointed. "Take your time getting cleaned up. I'll make some hot chocolate." Lisa hesitated for a moment. This still felt too good to be true. People didn't just help strangers like this. There had to be a catch, a price, something he wanted in return. But her children were shivering, and the warm clothes in her hands felt like a gift from heaven. The bathroom was just as surprising as the rest of the place. Clean, bright, with actual hot water that felt like a miracle against her cold skin. Lisa helped her children get changed first, and seeing them warm and dry for the first time in hours made her want to cry with relief. When they came back out, Tom had hot chocolate waiting for them, complete with marshmallows that made Ben's eyes light up like Christmas morning. "Real marshmallows," the little boy said in wonder, like he'd forgotten such things existed. "They're the good kind," Tom said seriously, sitting down across from them. "My wife always said life's too short for fake marshmallows." Amy climbed onto the big couch and pulled one of the soft blankets around her like a cocoon. "Where is your wife?" she asked with the innocent directness that only kids could manage. Lisa tensed up, ready to tell Amy not to ask personal questions, but Tom answered gently. "She's not here anymore, sweetheart," he said. "She got sick and had to go away. But she left all the beautiful things she made to keep me company." Ben nodded solemnly, like this made perfect sense to him. "My goldfish went away too," he said, "but I still have his castle." "That's exactly right," Tom said. "The love stays even when the person can't." Lisa watched this exchange with growing amazement. This giant of a man was talking to her 4-year-old about loss and love with more gentleness than she'd seen from anyone in years. Her own husband had never spoken to their children with this kind of patience and respect. As the evening went on, Lisa found herself relaxing in ways she'd forgotten were possible. Tom made simple dinner, just soup and grilled cheese sandwiches, but he didn't hover over them or ask invasive questions about why they were running or where they'd come from. He seemed to understand that some stories needed time before they could be told. After dinner, he showed them the most amazing part of the warehouse. Through a door she hadn't noticed before was a greenhouse area where his wife had grown vegetables and flowers. Even though it was October, the space was full of green plants and the air smelled like earth and growing things. She always said gardens were proof that beautiful things could grow anywhere, Tom explained, running his fingers over tomato plants that were still producing fruit. I'd try to keep it going the way she would have wanted. Amy was fascinated by everything, asking questions about how plants grew and why some had flowers and others had vegetables. Tom answered each question like it was the most important thing anyone had ever asked him. Ben found a comfortable spot on a wooden bench and fell asleep almost instantly, probably the first real rest he'd had in days. Lisa looked at her sleeping son and felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Peace. He looks like he feels safe, Tom observed quietly. He hasn't slept well in months, Lisa admitted. There was always shouting or tension at home. Kids. Pick up on that stuff, Tom nodded. My wife was a teacher before she got sick. She always said kids are like little emotional sponges. They absorb whatever's in the air around them. It was the opening Lisa had been waiting for, the chance to explain why they were there. But when she tried to find the words, they got stuck in her throat. How do you tell someone that your husband hits you? How do you explain that you stayed for years because you were afraid and ashamed and convinced it was somehow your fault? You don't have to talk about it, Tom said gently, like he could read her mind. I can see enough to know you're running from something bad. That's all I need to know right now. Lisa felt tears starting and tried to blink them away. I need to figure out what comes next. This was supposed to be temporary, just until I could make a plan. Plans take time, Tom said. Good ones, anyway. You're welcome to stay as long as you need to. I can't pay you, Lisa said quickly. I don't have money for rent or food or anything. I can work, I'm a nurse, but I need time to find a job and— Who said anything about paying? Tom interrupted. I've got more space than I know what to do with. Having people here, especially. Little people who ask good questions about plants, well, it makes the place feel more alive. That night, Tom set them up in a guest room that had clearly been prepared with love. Clean sheets, extra blankets, even a nightlight that cast gentle stars on the ceiling. Amy and Ben fell asleep quickly, exhausted from the day's emotions and finally feeling safe. Lisa lay awake for a long time, listening to her children breathe peacefully next to her. For the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of footsteps in the hallway or angry voices in the next room. The warehouse was quiet except for the gentle sounds of rain on the roof and the distant hum of the heater keeping them warm. She thought about Tom, this unexpected angel who'd appeared in their darkest moment. She thought about his wife who'd created this sanctuary of plants and handmade furniture and endless kindness. She thought about her whispered prayer just days ago, asking for help. Asking for a way out. Maybe the universe really had been listening after all. 2 weeks had passed since that stormy night, and Lisa was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to be okay. The children had settled into a routine at the warehouse. Amy helped Tom water the plants every morning, asking endless questions about how seeds turned into vegetables. Ben had claimed a corner of the greenhouse as his own personal reading spot, where he'd sit with picture books and talk to the tomato plants like they were old friends. Lisa had found work at a clinic across town, and every day felt like a small victory. She was good at her job, people respected her skills, and for the first time in years, she felt like herself again. The woman who had dreams and opinions and a voice worth hearing. That Tuesday morning started like any other. Lisa was getting ready for work while Tom made breakfast for the kids. It was such a normal, peaceful scene, the kind of morning she'd dreamed about during all those years of walking on eggshells. Then the pounding started. At first, Lisa thought maybe it was construction noise from somewhere nearby. But then she heard the voice that still made her blood turn cold, even though she'd been free of it for 2 wonderful weeks. I know you're in there. Open this door right now. Her husband's voice was exactly the same, that tone that demanded obedience, that expected the world to bend to his will. Lisa felt her whole body freeze up like a deer caught in headlights. Amy and Ben heard it too. Amy's face went pale, and Ben immediately started crying. All the progress they'd made, all the healing and laughter and feeling safe, seemed to disappear in an instant. Kids, go to the greenhouse, Tom said quietly, but his voice had changed. It was still gentle, but there was something steel-hard underneath it now. Lisa, you too. No, Lisa whispered, finding her voice. He'll just keep coming back. I have to face this. The pounding got louder, more violent. Lisa could picture him out there, red-faced with rage, Probably drunk even though it was only 9 in the morning. That's how he'd always dealt with problems. Alcohol and anger, in whatever combination felt right to him. "You can't hide from me forever," he shouted through the door. "Those are my kids in there, my wife. You think you can just steal my family and run away like some kind of victim?" Tom moved toward the door, but Lisa caught his arm. "Please don't," she said. "You don't understand what he's like when he's angry. He'll hurt you." Tom looked down at her with eyes that were kind but determined. "Lisa, I'm twice his size and I'm not afraid of bullies. But more importantly, this is your home now. Nobody gets to come here and threaten you or those kids." The word home hit Lisa like a punch to the chest. When was the last time anywhere had felt like home? When was the last time someone had protected her instead of demanding that she protect them? "I have rights," her husband was yelling now. "Legal rights." "You can't keep my children from me." Tom unlocked the door but didn't open it. "Sir, you're on private property and you're disturbing the peace. I suggest you leave before I call the police." "Who the hell are you?" came the angry response. "Some boyfriend she picked up? You think you can replace me?" Tom opened the door then, and Lisa saw her husband's face change when he got a good look at who he was dealing with. Tom was massive, calm, and completely unimpressed by the shouting and posturing. "I'm Tom," he said simply. "I'm the person who's asking you to leave." Lisa's husband tried to look around Tom into the warehouse. "Where are my kids? Where's my wife?" "You have no right to keep them from me." "They're safe," Tom said, "and they'll stay that way." "Safe?" Her husband laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Safe from their own father? From their husband? Lisa," he called out, "get out here and explain to this giant freak why you're being ridiculous." Lisa felt herself shrinking inside, the way she always did when he used that tone. But then she looked at Amy and Ben, who were watching from the greenhouse doorway. She saw the fear in their eyes, but also something else. They were looking at Tom like he was their protector, their shield against the monster from their old life. "She doesn't want to talk to you," Tom said, his voice still calm but with an edge now that made Lisa's husband take a step back. "This is kidnapping. I'll call the police. I'll call a lawyer." "You can't just steal someone's family. Call whoever you want," Tom said. "But you're going to do it from somewhere else." That's when Lisa's husband made the mistake that changed everything. Maybe it was the alcohol, maybe it was the rage at being challenged, or maybe it was just the kind of man he'd always been underneath the charm. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a knife. "Nobody tells me what to do," he snarled. "Especially not some oversized nobody who thinks he can steal what's mine." The knife wasn't huge, but it was sharp, and Lisa knew he wasn't bluffing. She'd seen him angry enough to break things, to hit people, to make threats that sounded like promises. This was the man she'd lived with for years, the one who convinced her that she deserved whatever treatment she got. But something strange happened. Instead of feeling terrified like she always had before, Lisa felt angry. Really, truly angry. This man had stolen years of her life, had made her children afraid in their own home, had convinced her she was worthless and weak and lucky to have him, and now he was threatening Tom. Sweet, gentle Tom who'd given them safety and warmth and a chance to remember what it felt like to be human beings instead of victims. "Put that away," Lisa said, stepping out from behind Tom. Her voice was shaking, but not with fear this time. "You're not taking anything else from us." Her husband's eyes focused on her, and she saw the same look that had terrified her for years. But now she also saw something else. He was smaller than she remembered. Not physically, but in every way? That mattered. He was just a man who'd learned that fear was a weapon, and anger was power, and that normal people would back down if you screamed loud enough. "There she is," he said, waving the knife in her direction. "My loving wife who ran away in the middle of the night like a thief. Do you have any idea what you've put me through? The embarrassment? Having to explain to people that my own wife took my kids and disappeared." "I didn't disappear," Lisa said, surprised by the steadiness in her own voice. "I left. There's a difference." "You left because you're ungrateful and selfish," he spat. "I gave you everything. A house, kids, a life. And this is how you repay me?" Lisa looked at him, really looked at him, maybe for the first time in years. She saw a man who thought love was ownership, who believed that providing basic necessities gave him the right to control and hurt the people around him. She saw someone who had never learned that real strength came from protecting people, not scaring them. "You didn't give me a life," she said quietly. "You took it away, piece by piece, day by day, until I forgot who I was before I met you." The knife trembled in his hand, and Lisa realized something that changed everything. He was afraid. This man who had terrorized her family for years was actually afraid of losing control, afraid of being challenged, afraid of facing the consequences of what he'd done. Tom stepped forward then, not threatening, just present. "Time to go," he said simply. And in that moment, Lisa knew that no matter what happened next, she would never be that scared, small woman again. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but to Lisa it felt like everything moved in slow motion. Her husband lunged forward with the knife, aiming not at Tom, but at her. Even in his rage, he was smart enough to know that going after a man twice his size wasn't his best option. But Lisa was his wife, his property, and his twisted mind, and if he couldn't have her, then nobody could. Tom moved faster than anyone that big should have been able to move. One moment, Lisa's husband was charging toward her with murder in his eyes, and the next moment he was on the ground, the knife spinning across the concrete floor, and Tom was standing over him, breathing hard. "Stay down," Tom said quietly, but his voice carried the kind of authority that made even angry men listen. "Just stay down." Lisa's husband tried to get up, his face twisted with humiliation and fury. "You think this is over? You think you can just—" "I said stay down." Tom's voice got quieter, not louder, but somehow that made it more frightening. "The police are already on their way. Someone called when you started threatening people with a weapon." It was true. Lisa could hear sirens in the distance, getting closer. One of the neighbors must have heard the shouting and done what good neighbors do, but her husband wasn't finished. Even lying on the ground, even caught and defeated, he couldn't stop trying to hurt her with the only weapon he had left. His words. "You think you're so smart now," he said, looking directly at Lisa. "You think you can just run away and start over? You're nothing without me. You were nothing when I found you, and you'll be nothing again when this big freak gets tired of playing house with someone else's family." Lisa felt the familiar sting of his words, the way they were designed to burrow under her skin and make her doubt everything good that had happened to her. For years, those words had been her daily bread, her constant companion. "You're worthless. You're lucky I put up with you. Nobody else would want you." But something had changed in Lisa over the past 2 weeks. Living with Tom, seeing how he treated her children with respect and kindness, remembering what it felt like to have opinions that mattered and a voice worth hearing, it had rebuilt something inside her that she'd thought was broken forever. "You're wrong," she said, her voice steady and clear. "I was never nothing. I was a good nurse, a good mother, a good person. You just convinced me I wasn't because it made you feel bigger." Her husband's face darkened. "You ungrateful, no." Lisa interrupted, and the firmness in her own voice surprised her. "I'm done listening to you tell me who I am. I know who I am. I'm someone who saves lives at work and grows vegetables with her kids and reads bedtime stories and deserves to feel safe in her own home." The sirens were getting louder now, and Lisa could see the flashing lights through the warehouse windows. Help was coming. Real help, official help. The kind that came with badges and the power to make men like her husband face consequences for their actions. "Mommy?" Amy's small voice came from behind them. She and Ben had crept out of the greenhouse, drawn by the silence that had followed the shouting. "It's okay, sweetheart," Lisa said, turning to her daughter. "Everything's going to be okay now." But her husband heard Amy's voice too, and his face changed. "Amy, baby, come to Daddy. These people have been filling your head with lies about me. I love you and your brother more than anything in the world." Amy looked at her father, then at Tom, then at her mother. Lisa held her breath, terrified that her daughter might run to him, might choose the familiarity of the past over the safety of the present. "No, thank you," Amy said politely. The way children do when they're offered something they don't want. I like it here. Tom teaches me about plants and he never yells. The simple honesty of it hit harder than any angry words could have. Eva. A 6-year-old could see the difference between a man who protected people and a man who hurt them. Ben, who was still too young to fully understand what was happening, walked over to Tom and raised his arms to be picked up. Tom lifted him gently, and Ben wrapped his small arms around the big man's neck like he belonged there. My new papa doesn't scare me, Ben announced with the matter-of-fact tone that only 4-year-olds could manage. Lisa saw her husband's face crumple then. Not with sadness, but with rage at being rejected by his own children. In his mind, they were supposed to love him no matter how he treated them. They were supposed to overlook the fear and anger and violence because he was their father, but children don't work that way. Children love the people who make them feel safe, who listen to their questions, who treat them like human beings instead of possessions. The police arrived with a burst of activity that filled the warehouse with uniforms and radio chatter and questions that needed answers. Lisa found herself explaining everything, the years of abuse, the threats, the knife, the way Tom had protected them. Her husband tried to tell his own version, claiming he was just trying to get his family back, that Tom had attacked him without cause, that Lisa was mentally unstable and had kidnapped his children, but the evidence was clear. The knife on the floor, the witnesses who'd heard the threats, the fear in the children's faces when they looked at their father. Most importantly, there was Tom's calm, steady account of what had happened. He didn't exaggerate or try to make himself look like a hero. He just told the truth in the same gentle way he talked about everything else. As the police led her husband away in handcuffs, he looked back at Lisa one last time. "This isn't over," he said, his voice low and full of promises that sounded like threats. "I'll get a lawyer. I'll fight for my rights. Those are my kids, and you're my wife, and no court in the world is going to let you steal what's mine." But for the first time in years, Lisa wasn't afraid of his threats. She had Tom standing beside her, solid as a mountain, and she had her children safe in their arms, and she had the law on her side. Most importantly, she had found her own strength again. "Yes, it is over," she said quietly. "It's been over for a long time. I just finally realized it." After the police left and the warehouse was quiet again, the 4 of them sat in the living room together. Amy and Ben were exhausted from the drama and fear, curled up on the big couch like puppies seeking warmth. Tom made tea for Lisa and hot chocolate for the kids, his hands steady even though Lisa could see the adrenaline still working its way out of his system. "Thank you," Lisa said, and the words felt too small for what she was trying to express. "For protecting us. For standing up to him. For everything." Tom shook his head. "You didn't need protecting," he said. "You needed backup." "There's a difference. You stood up to him all by yourself. I just made sure he couldn't hurt you while you did it." Lisa thought about that, about the difference between being saved and being supported. For the first time in her adult life, she hadn't been rescued by someone stronger. She had found her own courage, her own voice, her own power. She had just needed someone to stand beside her while she used it. The lawyer's office smelled like expensive coffee and old leather, but Lisa felt like she was going to throw up. She sat in a chair that probably cost more than her monthly salary, staring at papers that would either set her free or trap her. Forever. 3 weeks had passed since the confrontation at the warehouse, and now the real battle was beginning. "Mrs. Johnson," the lawyer said, looking at her over his reading glasses, "I want you to understand that this won't be easy. Your husband has hired a very aggressive attorney, and they're going to try every trick in the book." Lisa nodded, her hands twisted together in her lap. She'd known this was coming. Her husband wasn't the type to just accept defeat and walk away. He was the type to fight dirty, to use every weapon he could find, to make sure that if he couldn't win, at least everyone else would lose too. "What kind of tricks?" she asked, though she was afraid to hear the answer. The lawyer shuffled through his papers. "They're claiming you're mentally unstable. They're saying you kidnapped the children and brainwashed them against their father. They're also making some very serious accusations about Mr. Richardson." Tom, who was sitting beside her for moral support, shifted in his chair. What kind of accusations? They're claiming that he's an inappropriate influence on the children, that the living situation is unsuitable. They're even suggesting that there might be improper conduct happening in the home. Lisa felt her cheeks burn with anger and embarrassment. Of course, her husband would try to make something dirty out of the one pure, good thing that had happened to her family. Tom had never been anything but respectful, never even held her hand, never made her feel like she owed him anything for his kindness. That's a lie, she said firmly. Tom has been nothing but appropriate. He's been like a father to my children, a better father than their real one ever was. I believe you, the lawyer said gently. But we need to be prepared for them to paint a very different picture in court. They're going to say that you ran off with a strange man, that you're living in sin, that you've exposed your children to an unstable environment. Tom spoke up then, his voice quiet but determined. Will it help if I move out? If Lisa and the kids stay at the warehouse, but I find somewhere else to live until this is over? No, Lisa said immediately, the word coming out harder than she intended. I won't let him keep hurting people I care about, even from a jail cell. You're not going anywhere. But the lawyer was already shaking his head. Actually, that might make things worse. If Mr. Richardson moves out now, it could look like there really was something inappropriate going on. Our best defense is the truth, that he's a friend who provided emergency housing to a family in crisis. Over the next few weeks, Lisa learned that her husband's revenge was more creative and cruel than she'd ever imagined. He'd hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on Tom's past. He'd called Lisa's workplace with anonymous tips about her mental health issues. He'd even contacted the children's school, claiming that they were being held against their will. The worst part was the waiting. Every day Lisa expected bad news. Every phone call could be the one that changed everything. Every knock at the door might be social services coming to take her children away, or police with a warrant, or lawyers with papers that would destroy the life she was trying to build. I can't eat, she told Tom one evening as they sat in the greenhouse after the kids had gone to bed. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about what happens if I lose them. Tom was repotting a small tomato plant, his big hands surprisingly gentle with the delicate roots. You're not going to lose them, he said quietly. You're their mother. You love them. You've protected them. Any judge with half a brain can see that. But what if the judge doesn't have half a brain? What if they believe his lies? What if they think I really am crazy for leaving him? Tom set down the plant and looked at her directly. Lisa, do you remember what you were like when I first met? You under that bridge? She nodded, not trusting her voice. You were scared, wet, cold, and running from a man who hurt you. But you know what else you were? You were brave. Brave enough to leave everything you knew to protect your kids. Brave enough to trust a stranger. Brave enough to start over with nothing but love and determination. I don't feel brave, she whispered. One feel terrified. Brave people aren't the ones who don't feel scared, Tom said. Brave people are the ones who feel scared and do the right thing anyway. And that's exactly what you've been doing every single day. The court date arrived on a gray Thursday morning in November. Lisa wore her best dress, the one she'd bought for job interviews, and tried to look like the kind of mother who deserved to keep her children. Tom sat in the back of the courtroom, as far away as he could get while still being visible, trying not to look like the monster her husband's lawyer was going to paint him as. Her husband sat at the other table with his expensive attorney. And Lisa was shocked by how different he looked. He'd gotten a haircut, wore a nice suit, and had perfected an expression of wounded righteousness. To anyone who didn't know him, he probably looked like a concerned father fighting for his family. Your Honor, his lawyer began. My client is a hard-working man who came home one day to find his wife and children simply gone. No note, no explanation, no chance to work out their problems like adults. Instead, Mrs. Johnson chose to run away with a stranger, exposing their young children to God knows what kind of influences. Lisa's lawyer stood up for her turn. Your Honor, Mrs. Johnson didn't run away. She escaped. She escaped from years of documented domestic violence, from a man who threatened not just her but her children. She found emergency shelter with a Good Samaritan who asked for nothing in return except the chance to help. What followed was the most humiliating 3 hours of Lisa's life. Her husband's lawyer painted her as an unstable woman who'd abandoned her marriage at the first sign of trouble. They brought up every argument they'd ever had, every time she'd called in sick to work, every decision she'd made that could be twisted to look irresponsible. When it was her turn to testify, Lisa's voice shook as she described years of walking on eggshells, of hiding bruises, of watching her children learn that homes were places where people hurt each other. She talked about the night he'd threatened Ben, about her whispered prayer for help, about finding Tom under that bridge like an answer to that prayer. "Mrs. Johnson," her husband's lawyer said during cross-examination, "isn't it true that you never called the police during these alleged incidents of abuse?" "I was afraid," Lisa said quietly. "Afraid of what? Afraid they'd find out you were lying?" "Afraid. He'd hurt me worse if I called for help. Afraid he'd take the children and I'd never see them again. Afraid no one would believe me. But you expect us to believe you now?" Lisa looked across the courtroom at Tom, who gave her the tiniest nod of encouragement. She looked at her children, sitting with a court-appointed advocate, their faces serious and scared. She thought about all the nights they'd spent safe and warm in the warehouse, learning what it felt like to live without fear. "Yes," she said, her voice getting stronger. "I expect you to believe me now because I'm not afraid anymore. I'm not afraid of him, I'm not afraid of his threats, and I'm not afraid of the truth." When the judge finally spoke, Lisa held her breath and prayed harder than she'd ever prayed in her life. Based on the evidence presented, including police reports, medical records, and testimony from multiple witnesses, I'm granting Mrs. Johnson full custody of the minor children. Mr. Johnson will be allowed supervised visitation only, pending completion of court-mandated anger management classes. Lisa's legs gave out and she sat down hard in her chair. It was over, really, truly over. Her children were safe, her ex-husband's power over them was broken, and she was free to build whatever life she wanted. But the best part was knowing she'd done it herself. With help, with support, with people who believed in her, but she'd found her own strength and used it to save her family. That was worth more than any victory in any courtroom. Winning in court should have felt like the end of the story, but for Lisa, it was just the beginning of a different kind of battle. This one wasn't fought in courtrooms with lawyers and judges. This one was fought in her own mind against an enemy that had lived there for so long she'd almost forgotten it. Wasn't supposed to be there. 3 months after the custody hearing, Lisa was sitting in Dr. Martinez's office, staring at a box of tissues she hadn't touched yet. The therapist was a kind woman in her 50s who specialized in helping abuse survivors, and she had a way of asking questions that made Lisa want to run away and stay forever at the same time. "Tell me about this week," Dr. Martinez said gently. "How have you been feeling?" Lisa shifted in her chair. Even after all this time, talking about feelings felt dangerous. For years, having feelings had been a luxury she couldn't afford. Feelings meant letting your guard down, and letting your guard down meant getting hurt. "I keep waiting for something bad to happen," Lisa admitted. "Like this is all too good to be true, and any minute it's going to fall apart." "What would falling apart look like?" "I don't know. Tom deciding he's tired of us, the kids getting sick, my ex-husband finding some way to take them back, me losing my job, something, there's always something." Dr. Martinez nodded like this made perfect sense. "When you lived with your ex-husband, were there times when things seemed okay?" "Sometimes. Usually after he'd hurt me, he'd be really sorry and nice for a few days. Flowers, apologies, promises to change. But I learned that those good times just meant the next bad time was coming. The calm was just the space between storms. So your brain learned to be afraid during the calm times. I guess so." "That was smart of your brain," Dr. Martinez said, which surprised Lisa. "It was protecting you. But now you're safe, and your brain hasn't gotten the message yet. It's still looking for storms that aren't coming." Lisa thought about that. It was true that every good day felt like borrowed time. Every laugh from her children, every peaceful evening in the greenhouse with Tom, every morning she woke up without fear, it all felt temporary, like she was stealing happiness that belonged to someone else. How do I make it stop? She asked. The same way you got here, Dr. Martinez said, one day at a time. One choice at a time. One moment of believing you deserve good things at a time. The therapy sessions were harder than anything Lisa had ever done, including leaving her husband. In court, she'd had an enemy she could see, lawyers she could argue with, evidence she could present. In therapy, she was fighting ghosts, all. The voices in her head that told her she was worthless. All the beliefs that had been planted in her mind like weeds in a garden. I keep thinking about Amy, Lisa said during one session. She's 7 now, and she's so confident, so sure of herself. She asks for what she wants. She says no when she doesn't like something. She takes up space like she belongs in the world. That sounds wonderful. It is wonderful, but it also scares me. Because I remember being like that once when I was little. I had opinions and dreams, and I thought I mattered. And somehow I lost all of that. What if Amy loses it too? What if there's something wrong with women in my family? Dr. Martinez leaned forward slightly. Lisa, do you think Amy learned to be confident by accident? What do you mean? You've created a home where she feels safe to have opinions. You've, shown her that her voice matters. You've modeled what it looks like to be brave, to leave bad situations, to choose yourself and your children over fear. Amy is confident because you taught her to be... Lisa felt tears starting, and for once she didn't try to stop them. I just want to be sure I'm doing it right. The fact that you're asking that question tells me you are. At home, Lisa started, noticing things she'd missed before. The way Ben would climb into Tom's lap with a book, completely trusting that he'd be welcome there. The way Amy would argue with Tom about which vegetables to plant next, never worrying that her disagreement would make him angry. The way both kids would run to Tom when they were hurt or excited or confused, treating him like the safest person in their world. Tom, for his part, was fighting his own battles. One evening, Lisa found him in the greenhouse sitting among the tomato plants with a picture in his hands. It was a photo of his late wife, the one he kept on his nightstand but rarely looked at. Bad day? Lisa asked gently, settling down beside him on the wooden bench. Anniversary, Tom said quietly. 3 years today since she died. Lisa had learned a lot about grief in the past few months, both in therapy and from watching Tom navigate his own loss. She'd learned that grief wasn't something you got over. It was something you got through, again and again, like waves on a beach. Tell me about her, she said. Tom smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him all day. She would have loved you and the kids, he said. She always said our house was too quiet, that it needed the sound of children laughing. What was she like? Stubborn, Tom said with a laugh. Kind, but stubborn. She'd rescue stray cats and injured birds and make me help her nurse them back to health. She'd argue with the grocery store manager if she thought they were overcharging elderly customers. She'd stay up all night with a sick student because she couldn't stand the thought of a kid suffering alone. She sounds amazing. She was... But, you know what? I think she would have been really proud of what we've built here. This wasn't the life she and I planned, but it's a good life. It's full of love and laughter and people taking care of each other. That's what she would have wanted. Lisa felt something shift inside her chest, like a knot that had been tied too tight finally loosening. Do you think it's possible to have more than one good life? Like maybe the life I had planned is over, but this new life could be just as... Good? Tom looked at her seriously. I think some people get lucky enough to have 2 lives. The one they planned and the one that saves them. That night, after the kids were in bed, Lisa and Tom sat in the living room together. It was becoming a tradition, these quiet evenings where they talked about their days, their fears, their hopes for tomorrow. It wasn't romantic exactly, but it wasn't just friendship either. It was something new, something they were building. Together without rushing or forcing or trying to make it fit into boxes that other people would understand. I've been thinking, Lisa said carefully, about the future. What about it? I want to go back to school. Maybe get a degree in counseling or social work. I want to help other women like me, Tom smiled. That sounds perfect. You'd be good at that. It would mean more school, less money for a while, long hours studying. Lisa, Tom interrupted gently, you don't have to ask permission to have dreams. Not from me, not from anyone. If you want to go back to school, then we'll figure out how to make it work. The word we hit her like a warm hug. For so many years, every decision had been a battle. Every dream had been something to hide. But Tom talked about her goals like they were family goals, like her success was something he wanted to help build. What? About you? She asked. What do you dream about? Tom was quiet for a long time, looking around the room they'd made into a home together. I used to dream about getting my old life back, he said finally. But now I dream about helping this life grow. Maybe expanding the greenhouse. Maybe turning part of the warehouse into a place where other people could stay when they need help. Maybe teaching Ben how to build things with his hands. Maybe walking Amy down the aisle someday if she wants me to. Lisa felt her heart do something complicated in her chest. This man who had saved them was dreaming about staying, about being part of their story, not just for now, but forever. I'd like that, she said softly, all of it. And for the first time since that night under the bridge, Lisa let herself believe that good things could last, that happiness didn't have to be borrowed time, and that maybe, just maybe, she deserved every bit of love and safety she'd found. 1 year later, Lisa stood in the same greenhouse where she'd first felt safe, but everything had changed. The tomato plants were taller now, heavy with fruit that Amy and Ben had helped grow from tiny seeds. The space felt different too, bigger. Somehow, like it had expanded to hold all the love and laughter that filled it every day. Mama Lisa, Ben called out, using the name he'd started calling her a few months ago. At 5 years old, he'd decided that regular mom wasn't special enough for someone who'd save them all. The big tomato is ready. Lisa smiled as she watched her son carefully twist the red fruit from its vine. He'd grown so much in the past year, not just in height but in confidence. The scared little boy who used to flinch at loud noises was gone, replaced by a child who asked endless questions and believed the world was full of good things waiting to be discovered. That's perfect, buddy, she said, ruffling his hair. Papa. Tom is going to be so proud when he sees how you picked it without breaking the stem. Ben beamed with pride. He'd been calling Tom Papa Tom for months now, ever since the day Tom had officially adopted both children. Lisa would never forget sitting in that courtroom, watching Tom promise a judge that he would love and protect Amy and Ben like they were his own blood. The kids had been so excited they'd barely been able to sit still. Amy appeared from behind the pepper plants, her arms full of vegetables for dinner. At 7, she'd become the official greenhouse manager, keeping track of what needed water, what was ready to harvest, and what new plants they should try next season. Mom, can we plant strawberries next year? She asked, setting her harvest down carefully. I read that they grow really well in greenhouses, and Ben loves strawberries. That sounds like a great idea, Lisa said. You should talk to Papa Tom about it tonight. The sound of the warehouse door opening made all three of them look up. Tom was home from work, and like every day for the past year, the kids dropped what they were doing and ran to greet him. Lisa watched from the greenhouse doorway as he scooped both children up in a hug that could have lifted a car. How are my favorite gardeners? Tom asked, setting them down gently. We got 3 tomatoes and a whole bunch of peppers, Amy announced proudly, and I didn't break any stems. Ben added, That's my team, Tom said with the kind of smile that made Lisa's heart do happy flips. Should we go start dinner? Dinner was a production in their house, the way it is in families, where everyone has a job and everyone matters. Amy set the table with the care of someone arranging flowers. Ben helped wash vegetables, standing on his special step stool that Tom had built just for him. Tom handled the actual cooking since he was the only one tall enough to reach everything safely. And Lisa coordinated it all, the way she'd learned to coordinate busy hospital shifts, making sure everyone felt useful and included Dot as they ate. Amy talked about her day at school, where she was already reading books meant for kids 2 grades. Older, Ben told them about the fort he was building in the backyard with blocks Tom had cut for him from scrap wood. Tom shared news from his job at the construction company, where he'd been promoted to supervisor because people trusted him to solve problems and keep everyone safe. Lisa listened to all of it with a feeling she was still getting used to pure, uncomplicated happiness. No waiting for the other shoe to drop, no scanning faces for signs of anger, no walking on eggshells. Just a family talking about their day, making plans for tomorrow, being together. "I have some news," Lisa said when there was a break in the conversation. 3 faces turned to her expectantly. Tom looked curious, Amy looked excited, and Ben looked like he was hoping for ice cream. "I heard back from the college today," she continued. "I got accepted into the counseling program." The table erupted in cheers. Amy clapped her hands, Ben bounced in his chair, and Tom's face lit up like Christmas morning. "I'm so proud of you," Tom said, reaching over to squeeze her hand. "You're going to help so many people." "It's going to be hard," Lisa warned. 2 years of classes, plus internships, plus working part-time. There might be nights when I have to study instead of reading bedtime stories." "That's okay," Amy said. "Seriously, we can read to each other sometimes. And Papa Tom tells good bedtime stories too." "The best stories," Ben agreed. "He does all the voices." Lisa looked around the table at her family, not the family she'd been born into or the one she'd planned, but the one they'd chosen to build together, and felt overwhelmed with gratitude. A year ago, she'd been hiding under a bridge with 2 scared children and $47. Now she was surrounded by love, planning for a future that felt bright and possible. After dinner, while Tom helped the kids with their baths, Lisa walked through the warehouse they now called home. Tom had been busy over the past year, turning the space into something that felt like it had always been meant for a family. There were photos on the walls now, pictures of Amy's school plays, Ben's soccer games, family trips to the zoo, quiet moments in the greenhouse. The living room had been rearranged to include a reading corner where they spent most evenings, and Tom had built a play area where the kids could spread out their toys without taking over the whole house, but the biggest change was in the back of the warehouse, where Tom had created something that still took Lisa's breath away. 3 bedrooms, each one designed with love. Amy's room was painted soft purple with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Ben's room had walls covered in his own artwork and shelves for all his toy cars. And Lisa's room, their room now, since she and Tom had started sharing it 6 months ago, was painted the color of sunshine and filled with plants from the greenhouse. The phone rang, interrupting her thoughts. Lisa almost didn't answer, since dinner time was family time in their house, but something made her pick it up. "Hello? Lisa?" The voice was unfamiliar, hesitant. "This is Janet from the women's shelter downtown. I got your number from Dr. Martinez. She said you might be able to help with something." Lisa sat down, instantly alert. Dr. Martinez had been encouraging her to start volunteer work at the shelter, to help other women who were where she'd been a year ago. "What's going on?" Lisa asked. "We have a woman here with 2 young kids. She left her husband yesterday and she's pretty shaken up. She keeps saying she doesn't know what she's doing. That maybe she made a mistake. Dr. Martinez thought you might be willing to talk to her. Sometimes it helps to hear from someone who's been there." Lisa looked toward the bathroom, where she could hear Tom reading a story to the kids in silly voices that made them giggle. She thought about the woman at the shelter, probably scared, and second-guessing herself, probably wondering if she'd ever feel safe again. "I'll be there in an hour," Lisa said. When she told Tom where she was going, he just nodded and kissed her forehead. "Take your time," he said. "The kids and I will be here when you get back." The drive to the shelter gave Lisa time to think about what she wanted to say to this stranger who was living through the worst time of her life. She thought about the prayer she'd whispered in that bathroom a year ago, asking for no more pain. She thought about Tom finding them under the bridge, about the greenhouse and the courtroom and all the small moments that had led to this big, Beautiful life. The shelter. Lisa met Rebecca, a woman about her own age with a black eye and two children who looked like they hadn't slept in days. For an hour, they sat in the shelter's small kitchen, drinking coffee and talking about fear and hope and the terrifying possibility that life could be different. How do you know it's going to be okay? Rebecca asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Lisa thought about all the times she'd asked herself the same question. I don't know that it's going to be okay, she said honestly. But I know that staying wasn't going to be okay. And I know that 1 year from now, you could be sitting where I am, talking to another scared woman, telling her that she's braver than she thinks she is. When Lisa got home, the warehouse was quiet except for the soft sound of Tom reading in the living room. The kids were asleep, and he was waiting for her like he always did, like he always would. How did it go? He asked, making room for her. On the couch. Good, Lisa said, curling up next to him. Hard but good. She reminded me of me a year ago. You reminded her that there's life after the worst day of your life. Lisa thought about that, about how far they'd all come. Amy and Ben were thriving in school, making friends, learning what it felt like to be kids instead of tiny adults trying to manage everyone else's emotions. Tom had started talking about his late wife without pain, keeping her memory alive while building something new. And Lisa was becoming someone she'd never had the chance to be before. A student, a helper, a woman who took up space in the world and didn't apologize for it. I love you, she said, the words still feeling new and precious every time she said them. I love you too, Tom replied, pulling her closer. All of you, this whole crazy, beautiful life we've built. Outside, it started to rain, the same kind of storm that had brought them together a year ago. But this time, Lisa listened to it without fear, safe in the knowledge that some storms don't destroy things. Sometimes they wash away everything that was never meant to last, making room for something better to grow.